I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here I am. So buckle up, because it's about to get intense. I'm Chris, and for the past 6 years, I've been married to a woman named Emily. Now, before you start assuming we were the perfect couple, let me set the record straight. We weren't. Still, we had a pretty decent life together. But about a month ago, something felt off. Emily had her phone attached to her at all times, like she couldn't bear to be without it. Every time it buzzed or rang, she jumped to grab it, her face lighting up with a grin that looked like she'd won the lottery. She got really secretive, too. Whenever I'd walk into the room, she'd quickly hide her phone as if it held some sort of top-secret information. And then there were the late nights. Out of nowhere, she started saying she had piles of work to do at the office. But I knew her well enough. Before all this, the only late nights she had were spent watching Netflix, usually reruns of Friends. Of course, I tried not to let it bother me. Part of me was in denial. We had a good house, a good life. Why would she want to mess that up? But my gut kept nagging at me. I had this sinking feeling that something wasn't right, even though I tried to ignore it. After all, who wants to confront those kinds of suspicions? Then, one night, everything changed. I was getting ready for a quick business trip, just an overnight thing a couple of hours away. We were having dinner, chatting about nothing in particular. But Emily was way too cheerful, almost like she was happy to see me go. That's when it hit me. Her mood was completely off, like someone eagerly waiting for something. It was so ironic because I was the one leaving, not her. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone, speaking softly, like a teenager sneaking around behind her parents' backs. Emily's never been great at hiding things. So, it didn't take long for me to put the pieces together. I caught bits and pieces of her conversation. Things like, tomorrow night's perfect, he'll be gone, and my favorite, don't worry, we'll have the place to ourselves. Yeah, real subtle, right? I could barely sleep that night, my mind racing. A cold, simmering anger was building inside me, but I didn't say a word. I was trying to play it cool. I wasn't about to lose my temper and give her a chance to cover her tracks. No, I was going to be smart about this. I was going to plan my next move carefully. There I was, lying next to a woman who clearly had something else planned for the next day. I could have confronted her, thrown her phone across the room, and demanded answers right then and there. But I was too angry for that. I wanted to hit her where it would hurt the most. I needed her to get caught. No excuses, no way to talk her way out of it. The element of surprise was my secret weapon. So, I decided not to go on that trip after all. The next day, I told my boss I needed personal time off. Thankfully, he didn't hesitate to give it to me. After that, I went straight to the electronics store, spending a small fortune on surveillance gear, cameras, hidden microphones, and everything I'd need to monitor things remotely. If Emily was planning on bringing someone into our home, I was going to see it all unfold. I set up the equipment using everything I'd learned from spy movies. I knew exactly where to hide the cameras: the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, even the bathroom, anywhere she might go with her lover. I was determined to watch everything, but I didn't just want to sit back and passively observe. I had my own little surprise in mind. That night, before my supposed trip, we had dinner plans. I made sure to prepare the meal myself, and I took the opportunity to add the strongest laxatives I could find to her food. I know it sounds petty, but when your wife is planning to cheat on you in your own home, I think all bets are off. As we ate, Emily was practically glowing, clearly thinking she was pulling off some grand act of deception while secretly planning her little rendezvous. She ate her meal, oblivious to what was about to happen, acting like everything was normal, while I knew her night was about to take a very different turn. After dinner, I kissed her on the cheek, grabbed my suitcase, and said, "See you tomorrow night, babe." She waved me off like the dutiful wife she thought she was. But instead of heading to the airport, I drove to a hotel a few minutes away. I set up my laptop, connected it to the cameras, and waited. Let me tell you, watching your wife scramble to tidy up for her lover is an image that stays with you. And trust me, it didn't take long for everything to fall into place. Emily was darting around the living room, fussing with her hair, and slipping into a dress I hadn't seen before. The nerve. Then, the doorbell rang. From my hotel room, I watched her bolt to the door like an excited teenager. She fluffed her hair one last time in the hallway mirror, straightened her dress, and opened the door to greet her Prince Charming. But the guy who walked in didn't look anything like a charming prince, more like a janitor from some rundown motel. I almost burst out laughing when I saw him. His name was Ethan, as I would soon find out, and of course it was. He looked like a balding version of Humphrey Bogart, someone who hadn't stepped foot in a gym in a decade. And this was the guy she was willing to throw everything away for? Unreal. I leaned back in my chair, cracked open a beer, and settled in to watch the show unfold. Ethan walked in, grinning and holding a cheap bottle of wine, like they were about to have the most romantic evening ever. They started chatting awkwardly, laughing like two teenagers on a first date. It made my skin crawl, knowing exactly what was really going on behind their little act. They plopped down on the couch, wine glasses in hand. Emily was doing her best to play it cool, but I could see something wasn't right. She shifted in her seat a few times, trying to stay comfortable, but I knew what was happening. The laxatives were kicking in. She excused herself and hurried off to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Ethan, bless his oblivious soul, just sat there sipping his wine, unaware of the chaos brewing. I was glued to the hidden bathroom camera, watching as Emily struggled to keep it together. There she was, sitting on the toilet, her face twisted in discomfort like she was in the middle of some kind of digestive emergency. It was almost poetic. The best part? She tried to make it a quick trip, but when nature calls like that, there's no such thing as a quick bathroom visit. She finally re-emerged, looking a little pale, and sat back down next to Ethan like nothing had happened. But I could see the panic in her eyes. Ethan, clueless as always, leaned in, clearly hoping for some attention. Just as his hand slid up her leg, bam! Off she went again, darting for the bathroom. I nearly choked on my beer from laughing so hard. When she came back the second time, it was obvious the night wasn't going according to plan. Ethan was visibly frustrated, while Emily looked completely mortified. They tried to salvage the evening, but every time things started to get remotely intimate, she had to excuse herself again. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, and I was living for every minute of it. They even tried to watch a movie, but Emily couldn't sit still for 5 minutes without rushing off to the bathroom. Eventually, Ethan picked up on something being off. He asked her if she was okay, and she kept lying through her teeth. "I'm fine. Must have eaten something bad for lunch," she said. "Sure, Emily. Definitely the salad you didn't even eat." Before long, the romantic mood had completely disappeared. Ethan was annoyed, Emily was embarrassed, and everything had turned into a massive fail. They started arguing, Ethan accusing her of being distant, while Emily tried to hold it together. She stormed off to the bathroom one last time, and that's when Ethan had had enough. He grabbed his jacket, stood up, and walked out without saying a word. For a moment, I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. Watching Emily sitting there alone, probably wondering how the night had turned into the worst date of her life, gave me a satisfaction I can't quite put into words. But that wasn't the best part. No, the best was yet to come. I stayed in my hotel room, watching the aftermath of the most disastrous date unfold in real time. Emily sat there, likely replaying everything in her head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Meanwhile, I was grinning ear to ear, knowing that the whole mess was my doing. Sure, it was petty, but after everything she'd been up to, I felt more than justified in taking my little revenge. She started texting Ethan, probably trying to explain herself, but he wasn't responding. Honestly, I couldn't blame him. I'd have ghosted her too if I had to deal with that kind of chaos. She looked like she was about to cry, but I felt nothing. If anything, I felt a little smug as I watched her squirm. Eventually, she gave up trying to fix the night, tossing her phone on the couch in frustration. I could see her simmering with anger, probably mad at Ethan, at herself, at the universe for ruining her plans, completely unaware that the universe had a name. Chris. I was just getting started. When I got home the next afternoon, I wasted no time. As soon as I walked in, Emily perked up, acting like everything was fine, like she hadn't just spent the night trying to hide her secret. "How was your trip?" she asked with that fake smile, the one she probably practiced in the mirror. I could barely stand to look at her. "We need to talk," I said, cutting straight to the point. The smile instantly disappeared from her face. "I know what you've been up to, Emily," I started, watching her tense up. Her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for a way out or an excuse. She stammered something, but I wasn't buying it. "Don't. Just don't," I said, raising my hand to stop her. "I've seen everything. The cameras, the tech, your little plan to have Ethan over while I was gone. I know it all." Her face drained of color, and for a second, I thought she might actually pass out. But then, like clockwork, she switched tactics. The waterworks started. Tears poured down her face as she tried to plead with me. "Chris, please. It's not what you think," she wailed, her voice cracking. "I was feeling so lonely, and we've grown so distant. I messed up, but I swear I didn't sleep with him. Nothing happened." I couldn't help but chuckle at her desperation. "Nothing happened? Really? Because you spent the entire night glued to the toilet, Emily. I made sure of that." Her face shifted from shock to complete disbelief. "Yeah, dinner with laxatives. If you were going to betray me in our own home, the least I could do was make sure it wasn't a fun night for you." Her mouth hung open, but no words came out, utterly speechless. The tears kept coming, and she reached out for me, but I stepped back. "Don't even think about touching me," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I don't care about your feelings right now. You've been deceiving me for who knows how long, and now it's over." She crumpled onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, but I felt nothing. No pity, not even a shred. "You have until the end of the week to pack your things and get out," I declared, my tone hard and final. "If you're still here after that, I'll toss your stuff in the trash. And don't try to guilt-trip me into changing my mind. I've already filed for divorce. You're finished." Panic flickered in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "Please, Chris, I'll do anything. I was foolish. We can fix this. I can't lose you," she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. "It's too late for that," I replied, turning my back on her. "You didn't care about losing me when you brought that loser into our lives. Now you'll face the consequences." I left her there, crying, and locked myself in the bedroom. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me into forgiving her. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking we could fix this. It was over. She knew it, I knew it, and soon everyone else would know it too. Little did she realize, I had one final card to play. I wish I could say I felt some kind of satisfaction after that confrontation, but to be honest, I was still boiling with rage. The whole situation felt like some surreal nightmare I couldn't escape from. Her tears didn't soften the impact in the slightest. While she continued to cry in the living room, I locked myself in the bedroom, piecing together the final parts of my plan. Simply kicking her out and divorcing her wasn't enough for me. I wanted her to truly feel the weight of what she had done. Emily might have thought she could cheat on me and walk away with a few tears and a pathetic apology, but I wasn't letting her off the hook that easily. And as for Ethan, well, his reckoning was coming the following morning. I woke up before Emily did. I could tell she'd spent the night in the guest room, probably sobbing herself to sleep. And honestly, I couldn't care less. I grabbed my phone and made a few important calls. First, to my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. I wanted her served by the end of the week. Then, I dialed Ethan's wife. That's right, Ethan had a wife. And her name was Rachel. She had no clue about her husband's extracurricular activities. Lucky for her, I did. I wasn't looking forward to the conversation, but it was something that had to be done. The phone rang a few times before she picked up. "Hello?" she answered, her voice cheerful and unaware of what was coming. "Hi, Rachel," I said, keeping my tone as steady as I could. "I'm Chris, Emily's husband." There was a pause, and I could practically hear her mind racing to process the information. "Oh, Chris. Hi. Is everything okay?" she asked, clearly confused. I took a deep breath and cut to the chase. Listen, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I think you need to know that Ethan's been seeing my wife behind your back. They were planning to meet at our house while I was away for work. I've got proof, and I think you deserve to see it. Another pause, then she asked, much more softly, "Are you sure about this?" "Unfortunately, yes," I replied, anger rising again. "I've got emails, texts, and footage from security cameras. I can send you everything if you want." After hanging up, I glanced over at Emily, still holed up in the guest room, probably wondering if I might change my mind. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't. Later that day, I met Rachel at a coffee shop nearby. When I arrived, I was struck by how stunning she was. How could Ethan cheat on her with Emily? I mean, my wife wasn't unattractive, but next to Rachel, it felt like Ethan had traded in a luxury sports car for a rusted-out old clunker. I handed Rachel the evidence I had gathered, emails, screenshots, and even video clips, and I watched the devastation spread across her face. I almost felt guilty for being the one to deliver the news, but she deserved the truth, and Ethan certainly deserved whatever came next. We sat together for a while, talking through the mess. She thanked me for telling her, but I could see the disbelief in her eyes. She kept shaking her head, murmuring, "How could he do this?" I thought we were happy. We exchanged numbers, and I offered my support. Not that I was trying to be her knight in shining armor, but I figured if we were both dealing with this dumpster fire of betrayal, we might as well look out for one another. As I walked back to my car, I realized that this was the final nail in the coffin for Emily's affair and everything she thought she could get away with. She wasn't just losing me. Ethan was about to lose his wife, too. Once that happened, the whole house of cards would come crashing down for everyone involved. But I wasn't done yet. After meeting with Rachel, a strange calm washed over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The ball was rolling, and I could already feel the inevitable crash coming for both Emily and Ethan. They thought they could get away with it, that they could play both sides without facing the music. But now, the truth was out, and I was more than ready to see how they would handle the fallout. When I returned home that night, I found Emily slouched at the kitchen table, looking like a wreck. Her eyes were wide, filled with desperate hope, like she thought I might just wake up and forgive everything. But I wasn't about to entertain those delusions. "You've got 3 days," I said, dropping the divorce papers onto the table with a sharp thud. "I'm staying with a friend until you're gone. If you're still here at the end of the week, I'll call the cops." Her face froze in shock, disbelief flooding her features. "Chris, wait, please. We can talk about this," she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't actually sleep with him. We can fix this, can't we just?" I cut her off, my voice flat and firm. "Don't even go there. Whether you slept with him or not doesn't change anything. You were planning to. That's more than enough for me. You've betrayed me, Emily. And once trust is gone, it's gone. There's no coming back from this." She tried to argue, tried to twist things so she wasn't the bad guy, but I wasn't having it. I had no patience left for her lies or her tears. Every word out of her mouth felt like another attempt to manipulate the situation. So, I turned and walked away, tuning out her sobs as I headed upstairs to pack a bag. But before I left, I had one final thing to say. "Oh, and by the way," I said casually, glancing back over my shoulder, "I met with Ethan's wife today. I showed her everything." The color drained from Emily's face faster than I thought possible. She looked as if I'd physically struck her. "You what?" she gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Yep," I said, leaning against the doorframe, a smirk slowly pulling at my lips. "Turns out, Ethan's been lying to her, too. She knows it all now. She probably already has a lawyer lined up." Emily staggered back as if she'd been punched. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, her hands shaking. "Chris, no, you didn't. Why would you do that? This is between us," she sputtered, her face a mixture of shock and desperation. I couldn't stop myself from laughing at how brazen she was. "Between us? You really think that after everything, we still have anything left between us? You destroyed our marriage, Emily." Now you need to own up to it. Ethan's wife deserves the truth just as much as I did. She got up from the table, hands reaching out as if to grab me, her face pleading. But Chris, I love you. I never wanted it to come to this. I don't know what I was thinking. Can't we fix this? I shook my head slowly, my anger building again, but now mixed with a touch of pity. You weren't thinking about me at all, were you? You were only thinking about yourself and your secret affair. You didn't care what this did to me or what we had. Now it's over. You made your choice. Without another word, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. Part of me wondered if she really thought this could all somehow be swept under the rug, that I'd forgive her and everything would go back to normal. But there was no way in hell that was happening. She'd shattered my trust in the worst way, and once that's gone, there's no fixing it. I drove to Mark's place, my phone buzzing with a message as I pulled into his driveway. It was from Rachel. I confronted Ethan. He tried to deny everything, but when I showed him the proof, he broke down and admitted it all. I'm filing for divorce. A sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. Ethan and Emily had thought they could sneak around, start something new behind everyone's back. But now their little world was crumbling, and there was no one to blame but themselves. In the days that followed, everything spiraled. I stayed at Mark's place, his offer of support more of a distraction than anything else. He'd never been a fan of Emily, though he'd kept his opinions to himself for years. Now, I appreciated his company, even if the whole situation felt like something out of a bad dream. Meanwhile, Emily wasn't giving up. She flooded my phone with messages, calls, and voicemails. All the same apologies. It was a mistake, Chris. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't throw away our marriage. I knew better. She'd already thrown it away the moment she made the choice to betray me. I didn't bother responding. The only conversation that mattered now was in court. As for Ethan, within 48 hours, his world started to implode. He was served with divorce papers and thrown out of his house. Apparently, he tried the same sob story on Rachel that he had with me, but she wasn't having any of it. She wasn't the type to be manipulated. Rachel and I stayed in contact throughout the chaos. We weren't exactly friends, but there was an understanding between us. Something comforting in knowing we were both enduring the same betrayal. She was dealing with her own heartbreak, and while we weren't bonding over coffee, we shared updates and the occasional message of support. On the Friday of that week, I got a text from Emily. Chris, I'm coming to pick up my things. Please be home so we can talk. I scoffed. There was nothing left to talk about, but I knew it was time to officially sever the last thread of connection between us. I agreed to meet her at the house, not because I wanted a conversation, but because I wasn't about to let her rifle through our things unsupervised. Trust was gone, and I wasn't about to make it easy for her. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, I saw her car already parked out front. She was inside, looking completely defeated. It was obvious she hadn't slept or eaten in days, and she looked a mess. For a second, a small spark of sympathy hit me, but it quickly faded. Memories of her betrayal came rushing back. She made her decisions, and now it was time for her to face the fallout. I got out of my car and walked up to her, crossing my arms and leaning against the porch railing. You've got until tomorrow to grab your stuff and leave, I said, cutting straight to the point. She looked up at me, eyes swollen and red. Chris, please, can we at least talk this through? She pleaded. I let out a sigh and shook my head. What's left to talk about, Emily? You cheated. You lied. And you destroyed our marriage. You've run out of chances. It's over, I said, my voice cold. She opened her mouth to argue but quickly closed it, realizing there was nothing she could say that would change my mind. I still love you, she whispered, almost like she was trying to convince herself. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, well, I used to love you too. But that was before you decided Ethan was worth more than everything we built. Now, I don't feel anything at all. Her face fell, and for a moment, I thought she might beg again. But instead, she just nodded, the defeat clear on her face. Fine, she muttered. I'll pack my things. I watched as she went inside, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief. This was it, the end. As she began clearing out her things, I stood there in the living room, watching her pack. Her movements were slow, almost as if she were moving in slow motion, weighed down by some invisible fog. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't bring myself to. Not after everything she'd done. A few hours later, when she finally finished, the house felt lighter, almost as if her presence had been suffocating me. For the first time in forever, I could finally breathe. She dragged her last bag to her car, and I followed her to the front door. "Goodbye, Emily," I said, my voice void of emotion. She turned to face me one last time, regret in her eyes. "Goodbye, Chris," she whispered, and without saying another word, she got into her car and drove off. I stood there, watching her taillights fade into the distance, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of freedom. But just as I thought I could finally move on, life had one more surprise for me. After Emily's car disappeared from view, I stayed by the door for a moment, staring at the empty street, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. It was really over, or so I thought. I turned to go inside, eager to sink into the couch and enjoy the peace of my newfound freedom. As I walked into the living room, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Rachel. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." I raised an eyebrow. Rachel and I had kept in touch, but this message felt different, urgent. I didn't hesitate to call her back and pressed the phone to my ear as I sank into a chair. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked. Her voice trembled, and I could hear the emotion she was holding back. "Chris, I just found something out about Ethan. Something you really need to know." My stomach dropped. What else could possibly come out of this mess? "Okay, hit me with it," I replied, bracing myself. She paused for a second before giving me the news. Ethan wasn't just involved with Emily. He's been seeing other women. Lots of them. My jaw clenched. "You're telling me Emily wasn't even his only affair?" I asked, incredulous. "Not even close," Rachel replied bitterly. "Ethan's been unfaithful with multiple women. From what I can gather, Emily was just one in a long line of flings." "I thought you should know." I was speechless, trying to process this new information. Emily hadn't just had a brief affair. She had been one of many, just another face in Ethan's long list of betrayals. My anger flared up again, stronger than ever. The thought that she had destroyed everything for that? A serial cheater who didn't care about her at all? The whole situation was more pathetic than I'd realized. "Thanks for telling me," I finally said, trying to wrap my head around everything. "I guess this just proves they both deserve whatever's coming to them." Rachel sighed deeply. "Yeah, it's been rough. I'm filing for divorce, obviously, but honestly, it doesn't feel real. I can't believe this is my life now." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I get it, but you're doing the right thing. We both are. We're better off without them." She was quiet for a moment before responding. "You're right. It's just hard to see that sometimes." "I know," I said, trying to reassure her. "But we'll get through this. They're the ones who have to deal with the fallout of their choices." We kept talking for a while, sharing our disbelief over how two people could wreck not one, but two marriages for something so meaningless. It was almost laughable. Except neither of us was in the mood to laugh when we hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, still in shock. Emily had no idea about Ethan's other affairs. She wasn't special to him at all. Part of me wanted to confront her, to rub her nose in her humiliation. But another part of me realized I didn't care anymore. She was no longer my problem. A few days passed, and I started to settle into a new routine. The house was quieter, cleaner, and, most importantly, free from the tension that had been suffocating it for months. Emily texted me a few more times, begging for another chance, but I ignored every single message. It was over, and I had finally found my peace. Then, one evening, I got another surprise, a knock at the door. I opened it to find Rachel standing there, looking as drained as I felt. "Hey," she greeted softly. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. We sat down in the living room, and for a while, we didn't talk about Emily or Ethan or any of the drama. We just talked about life. What came next? It was strange, being with someone who had been through the same storm, but still feeling like a stranger in some ways. But there was something comforting about it, too. We were both trying to figure out how to rebuild. Eventually, Rachel gave me a small, tired smile. You know, she said, it's odd, but I feel like we're going to be okay. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. I nodded, a spark of hope flickering inside me. Yeah, we will. For the first time in a long while, I actually believed it. As we sat together in the silence, I realized something important. Betrayal can break you. It can shatter everything you thought you knew. But it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the end. You can rebuild, pick up the pieces, and even find light in the darkness. Emily and Ethan were just chapters in my life, and now I was starting a new one. That's my story. If you're going through something similar, just know this. Life doesn't end after betrayal. You can survive it. You can move on. And who knows, I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here I am.